Hello and welcome to this week's VR Vertigo. So gaming is in a precarious place. There are all kinds of studio closures, layoffs, lawsuits, not to mention the multitude of mumblings and grumblings from gamers who, generally speaking, can't work out what AAA gaming is doing. And so now we're back to the thorny subject of Marathon and the fact that it's currently hanging by a thread. So Sony have made one bad decision after another, and it's been commented on by many people over the last few months. But it's looking now to Marathon to save, to revive, to continue its live service ambitions and dreams. But I ask you, can you really save one game by killing another? I'm talking about Destiny 2, of course, and the fact that Sony have thrown everything, including the kitchen sink, at Marathon, and in its endeavours to keep it alive, is killing an already healthy child. Well, healthy may be too much of a stretch, but since its announcement to kill the game has been out in the wild for some time, we've seen players flock to Destiny 2. It's a good game. It could be great. And in its end-of-life state, in its current state, it's now in many ways become the very game it should have been all along. And Sony, in their endless endeavour to chase trends, find themselves once again behind in the race that they themselves created. So Sony have made Marathon the cuckoo in the nest, pushing out all competitors and funneling their live service players from Destiny 2 toward Marathon, herding them without so much as a by your leave into Marathon and saying, here, play this and be grateful. And as we've seen, predictably, it's not going well. But Mark, I hear you cry, this is a VR channel. Well, let's get there, shall we? So now we know that Sony are going to keep Marathon alive at all costs, it seems. They must surely be exploring every avenue in order to do this. Because cutting off one limb in order to save and grow another hasn't been the play that Sony had hoped it would be. Nobody wants to play a new IP at the cost of an old beloved IP, especially when it's being murdered so publicly. And yet here we are. Sony at this point has to be looking at what else it can bring to the table. And there's something right there, right under its nose, waiting to be utilised. Of course, it's the PSVR2 headset. It's incredible to me that Sony, who actually developed the PSVR2, has it within their stable, and yet somehow this bastard unfavourable child of theirs is being overlooked again and again and again. It seems as though Sony is at this point determined to follow a slew of bad decisions and continue the bad decision making. No, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that the PSVR 2 is the answer to all of Sony's problems. But hear me out. The PSVR 2 is still a great headset and wildly underused. Sony still haven't introduced backwards compatibility. But now they're faced with this other bastard child, Marathon, a game which is, as I've already said, hanging on by a thread. Surely this solution that occurs to me must be staring Sony in the face. So here it is, such as it is. Marathon is not doing well, and Sony needs somehow to shake this up, to garner some interest. And so what if, and I have mentioned this before, but it does bear mentioning again, what if they decide, with a great deal of fanfare, pomp and ceremony, to say, Marathon is changing, and it's changing for the better. Marathon is going to be the competitive animal we always wanted it to be. It's also going to have various modes attached to it, which we didn't initially announce. And to this end, we're announcing PSVR 2 inclusion in the gameplay loop. Yep, introduce VR into Marathon. Now, some of you are out there thinking this is absurd, and, well, maybe technically it might be. I'm not entirely sure. But what if they can do it? What if it is possible, then surely they have to do it. Your next objection obviously is there aren't enough numbers to make it worthwhile. Well, here's the thing. The PSVR2 is a great headset at a very reasonable price, and as such, for many players, would be a viable option. Marathon is the shiny new hotness, but it's been stained, and Sony themselves stained it, and so Sony themselves must clean it. And the only way they can do that is by stimulating interest via innovation. And the most innovative thing they can do is introduce a VR competitive element. Not only would you then have the PvE, PvP elements, but you'd also have the traditional gamers versus VR gamers. Who would be better, the flat screeners or those people wearing headsets who have mobility? An announcement like this to include VR in a AAA flat screen game would create a massive amount of industry buzz. They could legitimately say, "We are the first. Follow us," instead of endlessly chasing trends that they're always behind the curve on. It would be, effectively, a one-of-a-kind. The best, most competitive extraction shooter. And the VR numbers, although they may be relatively low, would certainly help keep the wolf from Marathon's door. It would create interest, and even, in my opinion, sell headsets. If Sony throws their considerable weight behind this adventure, then it only stands to win. Sony's bad decision-making streak must surely end, and the partial answer to their problems is sat right underneath their collective noses. And we can only hope that Sony finally looks at this once unbeloved child and thinks it's time to welcome it back into the fold. Sony must, at this juncture, develop the eyes to see and demolish the boundaries that oughtn't exist by using its own great headset. And so I say to you, Sony, be bold, be brave, and who knows, you might end up with the most incredible success. Do let me know what you think in the comments below. Do like, subscribe, and share. It really would help the channel. And until next time, bye-bye.